So is that. Are you happy to start? I'm now recording. Can I ask you, to what extent do you think that all the problems besetting South Asia, not just Pakistan, but the whole region, are traceable back to the nature of the partition settlement 53 years ago?
Two of the most important issues, the issues of proliferation and the issue of the Kashmir dispute or conflict, is directly related to the partition. The partition was savage. The partition left unresolved the Kashmir issue. The unresolved Kashmir issue led to a massive arms race in the subcontinent. The entire regional situation has been held hostage to the Kashmir issue.
Yet, Pakistan got what it wanted. It got an independent state based basically on religion, which was probably more than Jinnah ever expected to get. Now, having achieved that, Pakistan is still blaming the settlement for the problems that it faces today.
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it. Whether Pakistan should have been satisfied that a state had been created in the name of religion is one way to look at it. I see it differently. Partition was seen by the founder of the country as a way by which the Hindus and the Muslims of the subcontinent could live in peaceful coexistence. But because there was the matter of the unfinished business of partition, that is, the resolution of the Kashmir dispute, the promise of living in harmony and brotherhood never was fulfilled. And I think it's important for us now to go back to the founding principles of Pakistan and realize that somewhere down the line we have strayed in having failed to build the relationship between the two countries.
Talking about Kashmir for a while, have you ever been able to go to the Kashmir Valley?
I've never been able to go to Kashmir. I would love to go. I have hardly been able to go to India. I've only been twice. Once when my father was the Prime Minister of the country, and once when Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. My aunt, after whom I'm named, is buried in India. My grandmother, maternal grandmother, is buried in India. I have relatives there, but like many other Pakistanis, I cannot cross the borders. And that is one of the reasons why now I'm thinking, and my party is thinking of how we can change this. We do have a dispute over Kashmir, but we think the time has come to have open borders, open travel, open exchanges, to free our people. And maybe if we free our people, something better can be achieved than all the governments of the past.
This is not a policy which you pursued when you were in power.
You're right, it's not a policy that I pursued when I was in power, and I regret the lost opportunity. Not for myself, because there were many other things that I was able to do for the people of Pakistan. I regret the lost opportunity for South Asia. In particular, when those 11 nuclear bomb blasts took place, I had a terrible sense of, in a way, having let down South Asia, and I wondered that if I had continued the work begun with Rajiv Gandhi, we could not have avoided it. We had signed a non-attack on each other's nuclear facilities. That was the first nuclear agreement which was meant to lead to more nuclear agreements between the two countries. So I regret that lost opportunity and hope for South Asia that I can have another one.
Your first visit to India that you talk about, I think that was to Simla in 1972 with your father, who was then the Prime Minister. Did you feel then that the Kashmir issue was about to be solved?
No, I did not feel then that the Kashmir issue would be solved. We had just been beaten in a war. Our country had been divided, our army demoralized. 90,000 prisoners of war had been taken. We were fighting for Pakistan's survival. And I knew that my father went to Simla to save Pakistan. At the time, the Indians were exhilarated with their victory, and there was talk of dividing residual Pakistan further. My father was able to convince Indira Gandhi that a united Pakistan could bring stability to the region. Ironically, today, in the post-Cold War world, Pakistan has once again to give the region and the global community a raison d'etre for why its existence could be a factor for stability. Because if it fails to do so, it could collapse into sectarian and ethnic chaos in the manner that the former Yugoslavia or Afghanistan have collapsed.
What you seem to be saying is very near to what Najam Sethi said and got into such trouble for, that Pakistan is on the verge of being a failed state.
There are some people who say Pakistan is on the verge of being a failed state. I have a different view. I have a tremendous confidence in the dynamism of the Pakistani people. But I also feel very sad because generals have repeatedly undermined democratic leaders. I know what happened to me. And that's one of the reasons I feel sad. Pakistan can be a very successful state, but political leaders must be given a chance. Unfortunately, the generals didn't trust me, and they never trusted Mujibur Rahman before me. They didn't trust Prime Minister Suhrawardy before him. They've never trusted popular leaders, and unless they begin to do so, there is going to be chaos. Where will the army be then?
The repeated habit of the military in Pakistan of overthrowing elected governments and putting itself in charge, do you think that is in any way a result of the partition settlement and the nature of the way in which Pakistan was created? I'm thinking of the fact, for example, that within months of independence, Pakistan was at war.
Well, the Pakistani generals did not trust the politicians because they feared the politicians would make peace with India. However, there was an international situation too. The international community didn't trust the Pakistani people. They thought the Pakistani people would turn towards the region. And you must remember that Nehru was a die-hard socialist and it was a battle for the Cold War. So the international community backed the generals taking over and worked with the generals. And now there's a whole group that's grown up which believes that the generals have an organized force and can be an institution for reform. I don't share that point of view. I think that the international community could have prevented martial law, the suspension of the constitution and the parliament, if it had spoken out against the excesses by Nawaz Sharif of the Pakistan People's Party. Because it kept quiet, Nawaz Sharif lost a domestic consensus and the military stepped in. So I think it's important now for Pakistan, and indeed even for India and the world at large, to sit back and take stock and say, do we want a state that is divided ethnically and has sectarian warlords ruling over it, or can we work with the elected representatives of the people to give South Asia a chance that was promised in 1947 but unfortunately lost?
Lost because of the failings of the two nations?
Lost for many factors. There is never an individual factor, there are collective factors. I believe it was lost because Kashmir dispute was unresolved, so the agenda of partition was unresolved. But it was also lost because the generals were allowed to take over because of the Cold War dynamics. The generals then had the international backing to eliminate popular leaders. Popular leaders would have a dispute over Kashmir, but would not go to war. If you look at Pakistan's history, it's only when the generals have been in charge or their nominees have been in charge that relations have deteriorated. The rhetoric was bad when I was Prime Minister of Pakistan, but there were no conflicts in Kargil and there were not 11 detonations in the subcontinent. The level of debate, there were no hijackings. So matters have really deteriorated. And as I said, at the time, I was a leader who had not even made an initiative. And yet things were not so bad. So left to themselves, and I look at the frontier, there we have the Awami National Party. In Balochistan, we have the Baloch leaders like Mengal and Murray. And if you look at all the local leaders, even the MQM, they don't want battles, they don't want conflicts, they don't want nuclear detonations. But the power has been between the generals and the people. So those who are in opposition tend to look towards the generals to save them. This has to stop, and it can be stopped.
But you mentioned Kargil. When you were Prime Minister, did the Chief of Staff ever come to you with a proposal of the Kargil sort, pushing either Pakistan-based Kashmiri militants or Pakistan regular forces towards and through the line of control?
Yes, I was invited to briefing at General Headquarters, and in front of about 50 or 60 officers, I was given a briefing with maps, screens, slides, and at the end of the briefing, I vetoed it.
When was this?
I believe it was in the beginning of 1996, but I vetoed it. You see, the military, in a way, was right, and in a way, it was wrong. It was right because it was looking at it as a territorial problem. Territorially, they could and did go into Kargil and take it. But the political leadership had to look at it politically. That what would be the repercussions on the domestic economy and at the international level of such a step. So I did my job in vetoing it. And when my successor tried to pass the buck onto the military, I thought it was unfair.
But do you think the military having been turned down by you, vetoed their plan to launch some sort of activity in the Kargil area, that perhaps they simply didn't brief your successor as fully as they briefed you?
I would not agree with that. If they could brief me, they definitely would brief my successor, because the generals always had a certain reservation about me because I was a woman. I was a Democrat. I had my own independent base. Sometimes I would agree with them. Sometimes I would disagree with them. I would spend long hours in discussion and debate with them on Afghanistan, on America, on India, nuclear, host of issues. But with Mr. Nawaz Sharif, he was their civilian face. He came from the same constituency of pensioners and madrasas and people who fought the jihad. So if they could brief me, they certainly could brief him.
When you vetoed that plan back in early 1996, what was the reaction of the Chief of Staff and the other army officers who were looking to you for the green light?
Well, the way the military is organized in a command structure, there was a little bit of a debate. But then when I was insistent, they accepted and respected the decision and did not go into Kargil.
But had they done fairly advanced contingency planning at that stage?
Well, I won't like to go into all those details, and it doesn't really even work out like that. The way it's done is not that we're going to go and get Kargil, but there are war threats. So the intelligence apparatus will come up with a paper which will outline potential threats that can arise, and then the GHQ will be given the paper to see whether they are in a position to meet those threats. So it was decided in a way that it is a possibility that the Mujahideen may go and do this. And if the Mujahideen do this, then that would create a situation for us. But our backup troops can take care of it, and our possible nuclear umbrella can also give us a deterrence and a protection. So it was done in that way. It wasn't that the GHQ decided that we'll go to the Mujahideen. It was that the intelligence picked up from the Mujahideen that this was something that the Mujahideen could do. But once my decision came, then obviously down the line it was the job of every single operative to catch hold of them and say, don't you dare try anything of this kind, rather than turn a blind eye to it.
But are you saying that this idea, a Kargil-type idea, the genesis of it was with Kashmiri militant groups in Pakistan rather than with the ISI?
Yes, it is true, because whatever's actually done, ultimately it's the groups. There might be people, everyone thinks here that the ISI sits and the ISI decides what's going to be done. But the reality is different. There is a Muslim Brotherhood, and that brotherhood has been there since 1947. That brotherhood is made up of zealots who want to spread an Islamic order. They don't recognize any boundaries. So if there is a planning, it can be happening outside. Who knows whether it's even happening on Pakistan soil or outside Pakistan soil. But it happens in Pakistan and outside amongst the Muslim Brotherhood. Then they have their supporters, and that support, it percolates if they can get their people into the security apparatus. So then it grows. It's not that the ISI sits down one day and decides that this is what it's going to do. It's more complicated and therefore more difficult to control.
Looking at India and the impact of 1947 on India, do you think in any way that the rise of the BJP, of a very assertive Hindu nationalism, is also a product of the fault lines of 1947?
The rise of the BJP took place against the background of the collapse of the Congress. The assassination first of Indira Gandhi and then her son Rajiv led to the collapse of a party that was national in character and could unite all the different, culturally different, ethnically different groups within India. And now I foresee the direction that we will really be going back to an older part of history where local warlords or influentials owed suzerainty to a center. So perhaps what we're witnessing in India is the rise of permanent coalition governments in a loose federation together.
In the 2.5 years since Pakistan and India celebrated their 50th anniversary of independence, an awful lot of things have happened. The nuclear tests, Kargil and the threat of war, the military coup in Pakistan, the rise of the BJP to be virtually the natural party of government in India. In that period, do you think South Asia has gone from bad to worse in terms of stability and prospects for the future?
I certainly think the situation has deteriorated. It's deteriorated partly due to the belligerence of the BJP, partly due to the momentum that the Kashmiri movement keeps gaining in the occupied valley, and it's also partly because Pakistan doesn't really have a popular leadership. If you look back to 1996, it's just a short time away, but yet there were no hot pursuits across our borders. There weren't the detonations, the hijacking. It was a very different situation. But Pakistan has not had a popular government since 1996, and the artificial governments tend to play up the dispute with India in a different manner. They need to divert attention from domestic problems. So the belligerence of the BJP when endangered, because that government too has been in pressure, has been complemented by repeated belligerence from Pakistan too. The bus diplomacy, while overtly a peace opening, was really a cover for people to sneak into the Kargil area. So in other words, belligerency has been met with belligerency. I would not have accused the Indians of having done the hijacking if I had been in power. I mentioned this as a small illustration. They were smarting. They accused Pakistan. If Pakistan had handled the matter calmly, India could have looked bad. But we just took our relations to a new depth when Pakistan came out and made the announcement that it was really the RAW which had gone and hijacked the plane. And there are thousands such examples that I can give you that help the Gulf to grow rather than to overcome it.
I asked you earlier in the interview whether you'd ever been to the Kashmir Valley. You explained that you hadn't. Do you think you will ever see Srinagar?
Yes, I have tremendous resilience, as I said, in the Pakistani people. And being an optimist, I think the day will come when democracy will be restored. Our party will be in power along with its democratic allies, and I hope that we will be able to make possible the dream of a South Asian free economic zone which allows for free travel. And I hope that I, along with millions of others, will be able to travel wherever we want in South Asia, and I will go to Srinagar, about whose beauty I have heard from my father, but for me it's just a dream.
And if you do make it to Srinagar, which flag will be flying over the city when you get there?
Well, in the short term, the de facto situation will remain. But as the people to people contacts grow, as we begin to move freely, travel freely, then I believe that a change will come. Now, whether that change means that an Indian flag will be there, or a Pakistani, or a Kashmiri flag, I can't say. But I would like to see India and Pakistan open the borders between Kashmir while the Indians have their assembly there and we have our assembly, without prejudice to our positions on the Security Council resolutions. These assemblies could then meet amongst themselves to monitor the line and to prevent militancy and so on, and ultimately they could decide whether they want to be two assemblies with a supra assembly or whether they want to come together in one assembly. But first, if we can put aside our prejudices, begin to open up, then we look at things differently, and ultimately everything is how you see it.
Let me ask you one last question, again on this hypothetical position about Kashmir. Are you saying that you would be willing to pay a visit to Srinagar in the Kashmir Valley as part of an opening up between India and Pakistan while the Kashmir Valley is still ruled from Delhi?
Yes, I would like to go to Kashmir. I don't like the fact that it's ruled by Delhi. I know the Kashmiri people are unhappy and have given untold sacrifices. But I would like to go tomorrow, if I could. I'd like to go and meet with the all-party Hurriyat Conference leaders there. I'd like to see political prisoners if I could. But most of all, I would also like to meet the ordinary people who live there. I want to go there. I don't like these barriers. I don't like the situation where India doesn't let me travel to Srinagar and Pakistan doesn't like it if I travel to, say, Ajmer Sharif in India. We should be able to travel without eyebrows being raised or obstacles being put by anyone.
Thank you very much. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.